Okay, well, it is 5:01. I know people are still rolling in, but we are going to get started here. My name is Danielle Goldman. I'm co-founder and CEO of the Build Fellowship by Open Avenues. Some of you may have heard of Open Avenues Foundation, which is a nonprofit that we have been building for the last 6 years. And the Build Fellowship is our cap-exempt H-1B program that we have launched and are now building out nationally at nonprofits across the United States. So really excited to dig in a little bit more into the cap-exempt H-1B solution. But we are here today to talk about creative problem solving for immigrants. And I am here with two individuals who I respect so much. And I truly have been looking forward all week to this conversation because individually I have been waiting to catch up with you, but I decided to hold my excitement and give it all in this conversation to ask you the questions that I've been meaning to ask you for weeks since we've caught up. But I would love to begin by having you both introduce yourselves to the group. And I guess I'll start with myself first, and then we'll toss it over to you both. But for those who don't know me, my name's Danielle. For the last 10 years, I have been building and supporting foreign nationals in a variety of ways because my father actually is an immigration attorney. So I grew up, I guess we could say, much more than 10 years. I have been surrounded by this world of immigration. I've learned to appreciate the value that every single foreign national brings to the United States. It has been a core value of mine to continue to create pathways for foreign nationals here in the US and ensure that we are constantly pushing ourselves to think of ways that we can support these human beings who have so much to offer, and seeing every single person as someone that has the ability to build here and to live a fulfilling life here that contributes to others. So, I talked about Open Avenues and Build a little bit as a teaser, but I'm going to toss it over to Varun and Soundarya to briefly introduce themselves as well. Varun, if you could start, that would be amazing.
Hey everybody, nice to talk to you guys today. I'm Varun Negandhi. I'm an automotive engineer by profession, and on the side, I run Beyond Grad, which is where I help immigrants land their next dream job. This is me just using my 14 years of experience working with a US company and paying it forward to help other immigrants like me just land better jobs. The thing is that jobs cannot be decoupled from immigration from for us immigrants. So by default, I do write about immigration and some creative solutions that I'm seeing out there. Like Daniel mentioned, creative problem solving. That's what all immigrants tend to need to kind of survive and thrive in the US. I write a lot about that, and I write about job search, and I'm excited to be here.
Amazing.
Amazing. Well, I feel like, my story I never thought I would ever write a book on immigration called Unshackled, which I published last year. But it's a very personal thing. I think all of you on this call who are here, you're here because immigration affects everything in your life. It affects your future, your family, your kids, your creative freedom. Personally, for me, it affected my creative freedom or lack of it. So that's what got me started on the path to first figuring out how I can be a founder on an O1 visa myself, and then trying to write a book around not just the O1, but overall the system as a whole, and how we can educate people to take more informed decisions. And it doesn't mean advocating to stay in America even. It means knowing your options, all of your creative solutions, which we'll talk about on this session, and then deciding if America is the best fit for you. And sometimes it's not, and that's okay too. And you can leave and go to another country, like Varun is currently in Canada. So yeah, that is about the book, and the community is around helping more people file talent visas. So those are some projects that I'm working on.
Amazing. And Soundarya, I'd love if you could just also tell a little bit more and start about talking about how you made this transition. I mean, you yourself went through this process of the O1 and you experienced it firsthand. So how did you, what was the turning point? Did something just click and you said, you know what, I've been through this and I now need to help others? What was it that changed, and how did where did you take it from there?
The good thing about me is I actually remember all the key dates in my life. And on June 17th, 2022, I sent out an email to about 2,500 people. The email subject just said, "A book on immigration to help people like you." I sent that email because that day I was talking to my mentor, Rajesh, and I was telling Rajesh that, Rajesh, I got my O1 denied a month ago. So this was a month after I got an O1 visa denied, which I applied to for the first time.
Wow.
And I told him, but I feel like I cannot move on from this. I mean, after having gone through this really horrible process, and having accumulated so much knowledge on this, I feel like I'm uniquely positioned to write something about this. I wasn't thinking of a book at that point. I just wanted to write maybe a short guide on at least the O1 as a process. And so he said, "What's stopping you? Like, why don't you email people and ask them if they think it's a effort worth pursuing?" And so I sent that email to 2,500 people. And in the email, I ended by saying, "What are your top 3 questions that you want this book to answer?" And that felt like it opened up a floodgates of emotions and frustrations from especially Indian nationals who have been disadvantaged more than anyone else by the immigration system. And yeah, that was a turning point. When I saw those emails, I felt like maybe there's something here that's bigger than just the O1. There is something that's systemically wrong with the system that we could talk about.
Yeah. And why did you call the book Unshackled?
Because the day I quit my corporate job at Salesforce, end of 2021, the word that came to my mind was freedom and being unshackled from, yeah. And so I knew in that moment that if I ever write a book, it's going to be called this.
Love that. And Varun, you also made this transition. I mean, by trade are a technical, professional, and you have decided to dedicate your life also to helping individuals go through what you experienced yourself. Can you talk about what that turning point was like for you and why you decided to be this problem solver and supporter of others?
I think as immigrants, we are at a disadvantage because we don't have a lot of information. So we are learning everything new right from the get-go. We come here, just pack our bags and come here, no network, no corporate know-how as to how things really work. So one example is that back home, a lot of us get just placed at companies right out of university. And then it becomes easier to switch from one company to another because we don't have like these visa things that we have to take care of. Whereas here in the US, is you have to market yourself, you have to sell yourself to get a job and then to grow in a job. So I was somebody always interested in entrepreneurship, and I realized there was a big parallel between entrepreneurship and corporate growth. You had to be like an entrepreneur inside this corporate environment to grow. So I'm just paying forward what I learned in entrepreneurship through my mentors, and I guess I'm just trying to close that gap because all of us are reinventing the same wheel. All of my friends are getting promoted at the same time, trying to learn all this on our own. But I just wanted to close that gap as much as possible.
Yeah, no, it's amazing. And when you've been through it yourself, it's much easier to share because you have the same emotional experience of going through it and you're able to relate to everyone. I mean, Soundarya, I think of you often like going on this campus tour and talking to all these individuals in these spaces. And it's not, people are not being talked at. They're having a conversation with you because you have personally been through this with them. And Varun, I think it's the exact same for you. You've just been, you're able to really relate and be on the same side of the table as everyone that you are speaking with. So I want to start, and I'm going to make sure that we have everyone's full faces on the screen as we talk today. But the first, I want to talk about problem solving because I think that you two talk to so many foreign nationals across this country on a daily basis. And I want to talk about what those problems are that a lot of folks on this call today are probably feeling themselves, or maybe they haven't thought of yet because they're not at that stage. But the important thing about solutions and building solutions is you fully internalize and understand the extent of the problems that are faced in this industry. And Soundarya, I'd love to start with you because, as I mentioned, you just got back from this campus tour. You had conversations with maybe thousands, if not hundreds and hundreds of foreign nationals and international students across the country. Can you talk about some of the main themes that came up and main challenges that came up as you had conversations that, individuals really articulated as the main problems that they were facing?
We met almost 2,000 students, and I'm going to share a few patterns that I noticed. First pattern was a question that we asked unanimously across all of the universities was, how many of you know about the O1 visa and understand its requirements? Less than 10% would raise their hands.
Wow.
Except for the last event, which was in the Bay Area, where people were slightly more, I think, aware of this because they were from my newsletter, so they probably knew about it. The knowledge was very scarce. And even the people who knew about the requirements or knew about the O1 as a visa wouldn't understand how to start the process. What exactly can I do? Just so much lack of information or misinformation. That's one pattern. Second was so many students asked about day one CPT.
Yeah.
That is their go-to alternative for not getting picked in the lottery. And it's a very risky option. And, in every single university, at least one student would have raised their hand and asked the lawyer, what do you think about day one CPT? Should I go for it or can I go for it? And another question that kept coming up was, what do I do if I get laid off? What are my options to stay in the country? So, these are some common themes we observed. Interestingly, we also got questions on the national interest waiver a lot. I don't know how many people on this call know about that. And if you think it's worth it, I'd love to explain, Danielle, what the NIW is.
Yeah, I think we should. So in the next section of solutions, I'm going to ask you what are the key things you think people should be thinking about as the key solutions and visa pathways people should be thinking about and are talking about right now. So we'll definitely get to that. And see, you're solutions minded. You're thinking of course, what are
I just immediately go there. But you're right. The problems, articulating them are very important. And really the main problem was that people didn't know where to go get this information because ISSO departments, which is the International Students Office at different universities, they're very sanitized. They don't really like to give creative solutions.
Right.
Because they just want to be more risk averse and conservative. And so no student that I spoke to had told me that their ISO department was helpful or useful in this regard. So
I'm not surprised to hear that, but it is disappointing. And Varun, I'm sure you have a lot of opinions on that. And I'd love to hear what your thoughts are because you're working with students all the time. What are you experiencing? People are coming to you for a reason. Your service is necessary because there is a lack of information being shared. And at the same time that there's a lack of information, there's information overload in our country. Right. And my next topic was actually about information overload. What do we do? Varun, I want to hear about the challenges you're hearing, but I also want to hear about what your thoughts are on the fact that there's so much information accessible to everyone about different immigration solutions and pathways and services and softwares. What do you advise individuals when they're experiencing that information overload?
I would say information overload is a good problem to have because one of the challenges as an immigrant that I faced was I came to this country in 2010 with like blinders on me, like a horse. Just, okay, my next target is finishing my studies and getting a job. I didn't know about H1B lottery odds. They weren't as prevalent. They were just starting to come in. I didn't know anything about this might be a shocker. I've known about O1, EB1A, the solution that you have, all of this in the span of the last 1.5 years, when I started writing on LinkedIn and started to follow people like Soundarya and have other conversations like that. So for that question, I would say information overload is a good problem to have. If you don't have that, it means you haven't dug through everything that you need to do. Unfortunately, immigrants need to minor in immigration as well as major in whatever their field is to kind of survive in the US. So information overload is a good problem to have. When you have that problem, reach out to a lawyer to find the right solutions, because at some point you just need a lawyer to help you. And no matter how many of us keep writing about these things, you need to talk about your specific nuance.
Mhm, mhm.
That is also a good segue into the challenges, Danielle. The one challenge is don't come here with blinders on. You'll be in for many shocks along the way, like I experienced. Then the other challenge is the H1B lottery. So if I don't get selected in the lottery, what happens? And this one hits home because my first cousin didn't get selected in the lottery 5 times. He went through the day one CBT route. He's now turned his payroll into Canada because he saw me come to Canada on a PR. So he put his PR. He had a PR, so he was able to get this. That's the second challenge. And the third challenge, which I hear a lot, is career freedom. So Soundarya mentioned Indians being disadvantaged by the EB2 black hole that we are in right now. What that does is it limits a lot of your career options. You can't really choose to go to a company and work in a field that is not your field of study. There's major problems with that. And then if you want to be an entrepreneur, you need unique ways to do that. It's not as simple as just you start an LLC and you start charging people for money. You can't do that. So those are the three challenges that I would say I hear a lot.
That's interesting. And I think, you know, for founders specifically, there might be even more options than we're, you know, aware of. And I look forward to chatting about founders specifically in a few minutes because you know, pathways are often open to founders to get a little bit more creative in how they do things. Soundarya, can you talk about, you know, as you were going on this tour and as you were talking to these individuals and you were talking about different solutions, I want to pivot to hear a little bit about what solutions when you start to give individuals advice about how to think about their case and how to move forward with getting and collecting information, again dealing with this information overload. What are you advising individuals with how to process the fact that they are a set of very unique factors, and when you go to a room of 200 people and you're talking about solutions, how do you ensure that everyone you know, is able to leave that room and feel like they know how to take their next steps with navigating their process?
Gosh, I mean, I I think that's an excellent question, and it's a really hard question to answer as well. I don't even know if we accomplished that in the sense of making sure every single person who came walked away with a unique plan in mind. And I don't think that was the purpose of the tour. The purpose was to open people's eyes to possibilities. And hopefully, one thing that I kept telling in every single university was today should be the starting point. Like, let this not be the end of you being proactive about immigration.
Yes.
Let this be like one of the starting points and keep this going in the future as well. Because anyone who decides to show up for an event on immigration on a weekday evening is clearly in the top 1%. It's not a fun topic. It's in fact incredibly boring and complex and overwhelming to think about. So I don't know if I would have gone for such an event at Columbia 5 years ago. So I think people who came are already kind of above that bar. And so I, we just kept honing in on the fact that we showed them all of the options available, like not to get into solutions, but we just showed all the solutions that they could be thinking about. And then we brought lawyers so they could go and talk to lawyers after the main stage closed, so they could go ask very specific questions that they had about their case to the lawyers. But anyway, sorry, you tell me if there's a specific element you'd like me to tell more about.
I think what you're saying is interesting, which is you need to seek out proactively information, and being at your event is the first step, and you have to keep seeking out that information and then meeting with lawyers. I mean, you and Varun both said that. So I think that that's a really, you have to get in front of lawyers. And for anyone who didn't hear our banter before everybody came on, I have heard this time and time again from foreign national after foreign national that everyone really just needs time with attorneys. And no matter how many technologies are launched or how much information is out there, it's generalized. And the thing about immigration is it's very specific to every single person's unique set of factors. And so what we're starting is a breakfast club, and it's going to be a grassroots effort to get lawyers in front of foreign nationals. And I really, believe to my core that what you're saying is true, that individuals need that access, and that's really important. So speaking of breakfast clubs and solutions, you can see that we're all here, solutions people. But Soundarya and Varun, I'd really want to hear from your experience. Varun, starting with you, what do you think are some underutilized resources that individuals don't necessarily take advantage of when they're navigating their path, or when they're trying to find this information about how to move forward?
Let me just frame that answer using the three challenges that I talked about. So
Perfect.
if the first challenge is that I'm come here with my immigration blinders on, then I would say just start following people on LinkedIn who are writing about immigration. That's just a very simple first step. If I could buy everybody Soundarya's book, I would. I highly recommend that as an option as well. Yeah, it's
Thank
it's
you.
brilliant. So for the first problem, just follow people, and then if you can, just buy Soundarya's book. That's a very simple solution. The second set of challenge that I have with people is people don't know what their options are post H-1B. So your build fellowship and open avenues is the underutilized solutions. I would definitely tout that. Day one CPT is known widely. Whenever somebody's stuck, that's the first option everybody thinks about. But do know that there are some challenges with it. So you can research those challenges. And another underutilized is O1 for that part, because I think when you don't get an H-1B, it means your company is willing to have you stay in the country. It's just the lottery didn't go your way. So if they are willing to have you stay, there might be solutions that you can both come up with, which is an O1 being the easiest one, where there is no lottery. You can come in with some information. So the employer, if they aren't aware of O1, they can kind of digest what it is. And then that can be a great path as well. And for the third one, where you are stuck in your career, you want to start something on the side, like a founder. I think the most underutilized, again, is O1 for founders. That's one highly underutilized one, which I've seen many of my friends now getting, and then obviously the EB1 route. I'll just end with one thought, which is when you say that you need to speak to lawyers, I would recommend you speak to 2 or 3 lawyers, especially for the O1 and the EB1 option. And the reason being, this was me in 2018. I was speaking to my lawyer. I had already written papers with some citations, but my lawyer thought that those weren't enough. And I didn't have the wherewithal to know what are my other options, and then she was under no obligation to tell me what my other options were or how to build my profile. So speak to different lawyers, some lawyers may not think you have a case, but some might. I know if I had gone and gotten different opinions, I was a partner at my company. I had equity, so I could have passed that one criteria of compensation. I have written papers, so I could have built a better profile. So what I'm trying to say is, if you go to a couple different lawyers, some might tell you what you need to build a profile. That could have been amazing piece of information at that point. I didn't have any of that. I just saw some friends move to Canada, followed them, lived at a border city while continuing to work in my border city US job. So those are some creative options based on the different challenges I talked about.
Yeah. And Varun, I'd love to also just take up one step back, because as we're talking about these solutions, you're throwing out O1, EB1, you're throwing out a variety of, and CPT and these post H1B lottery options. Could you, as someone that's an advisor for foreign nationals when they're leaving school and thinking of the whole journey and the trajectory of their immigration pathway, I think everyone on the call would really appreciate if you could kind of map out what what that journey looks like, what a typical journey looks like, and where some of those challenge points are on the journey. So if anyone on this call is at the beginning of that path, you'll have a better idea when we're referencing O1 or EB1 what these mean for you.
Sure. First, while you were saying that, I was just laughing because I can't believe I know all these terms and I have to learn all these terms. Like, even when I'm watching Suits, I'm just watching for the acting and the banter rather than having any clue of the legalese. But it sucks that I know so much about immigration. Um, the typical route is an F1 student getting an F1 OPT, getting an H1B, getting an EB2 green card. And in normal circumstances, that's like a 6 to 8 year journey. And at the end of 8 years, you have a green card in your hand. In this case, I think the first roadblock comes with the H1B lottery, and then there are branches from there. There's an O1 if you don't go through, there's build fellowship if you don't go through, there's moving to Canada if you don't go through. And then another challenge that comes is when you go after the EB2 green card, you realize that at least for Indian born nationals, it's going to be a 50+ year wait. My joke is I'll get my grandchildren before I'll get my green card. It's that ridiculous. So in that case, again, O1 opens up as a way to be a founder even while you're stuck in the loop. That doesn't help you with the green card, by the way, but can get you closer to EB1 because the criteria are similar. So that's kind of a general understanding. I don't know how deep you want me to go into each.
No, I think that's really helpful for folks who are in F1 and the student visas and are thinking of the first step, which are the temporary work visas, H1B or O1, and then moving on to green card. It's challenging to go from F1 straight into a green card process, and everyone starts with these temporary work visa options. And Soundarya, we're talking about this H1B lottery as the go-to next step for folks. You write a lot on LinkedIn about, just like Varun, about various pathways. You went the O1 pathway. Can you talk about what it takes to get an O1? And I'm sure you get this question all the time. It's all in your book for folks that need more guidance, but can you give
so I was gonna say, you guys don't have to read the book. I can tell you as well. I'm not gonna force you to read. I think Varun did it beautifully, like the way he described all the options. As Varun said, I actually know too much about immigration as well because of the last 2 years. So all the options Varun said make sense, but Danielle made a very good point that it can be very overwhelming to hear these alphabet soups of letters for the first time. Like, what is an O1? What is NIW? What's CPT? It's just letters. I think I really want to take an even bigger step back and ask everyone on the call, do you want to settle down in America? Is that what you're envisioning for your life, first of all? And I am seeing some questions come up in the Q&A tab. And, I'd love to see more questions come up because then I can understand what kind of people do we have on this call. Because I think if you want to settle down and if you're clear of that, and if you're from India, then everything Varun shared is you have to know that this is the reality. There are really only 3 ways to get a green card if you're Indian national. Only 3 ways that is within the next, I would say, 10 years that you can get it. There is EB1A or B, which is an extraordinary ability green card you get based on merit. It requires you to meet a very high bar, and you have to be at the top of your field for that. It's possible, but it takes time to get there. There is EB1C, if you can be a manager at a company outside the US for a year or two, and then come back to the US on the EB1C, which I am hearing has been abused a lot in the last few years, especially. Consulting firms have been abusing this route to get people green cards. And the third route is an investment visa. Invest up to $1 million, and then you'll get EB5 as a green card. Each of these are still backlogged, by the way. It doesn't mean you'll get the green card the moment you get approved. You still have to wait 4 or 5 years to get it on hand, probably. So I think people just need to know that this is the reality for Indian nationals. Let's say there's someone on the call who's not from India. For them, I think the EB2 NIW is a fantastic pathway to pursue. And I'm going to be sharing this on LinkedIn in a day or so anyway, but I got my NIW approved last week because I filed it like a month ago or something. Thanks.
Wow, congratulations.
Thanks a lot.
You heard it first here, folks.
And the NIW means National Interest Waiver, and it's one of the only 2 options through which you can self-petition for a green card, EB1A being the other option. So National Interest Waiver means that the US is waiving your firm certification that you have to otherwise go through. If you can show that your work is in the national interest and it is of substantial merit to this country. So I would say anyone who's working in a STEM field, engineering, AI, research, science, should at least take a look at the criteria and see if there's a way they can make a case for it. Because the advantage of NIW for non-Indians is that you can waive labor certification entirely, and that's like a 2-year process. You get to self-petition. You don't need an employer to sponsor you, and you get to control your timeline. It's on you. So I think, yeah, for non-Indians, it's an excellent pathway. For Indians, I would still recommend go for it because you get to still skip 2 years in this long green card pathway, and you get a priority date logged in. That's actually why I applied. Personally, my lawyer, Samir, pushed me to apply because he said, I don't think you're ready for an EB1A just yet, but you're very ready for an EB2 NIW. So why don't you file this, get a priority date, and then you can move it later on when you file an EB1A. So anyways, I know that's a lot, but just wanted to put that out there for people.
Yeah, it's really interesting that you always separate, Indian and we can include Chinese nationals in that bucket. Can you explain to the group, because we always attract a wide, folks from around the world to our webinars and to the Build Fellowship community. Can you explain why you separate out Indian nationals in this green card process?
Yes. And that can be summarized in a 5-word horror story called 7% cap on every country. So back in 1990, or I don't know if this was even before 1990, they put a cap of 7% on every country, meaning every year there are only 140,000 employment-based green cards given out. So they said that no one country should get more than 7% or about 10,000 of these visas. So that means that, India has a lot of people. It's 1.4 billion people, and a lot of people from India moved to the US. And it's just, at some point in, I would say 2008 or 9, the demand surpassed the supply. And since then, there's been a backlog of more people applying for this green card from India specifically, and China as well. But China, I think, is maybe backlogged by 5 years. maybe 10 years. India is backlogged by 100 years. So I think that's why I don't include China in my, because it's just such a big difference there. But any other country is pretty much current, which means if you file a green card and get it approved, you may get the green card within the next year or two. So that's the difference.
And even with a year or two of wait time, often that means that individuals need to find temporary work visa solutions while waiting for a green card. So Indian nationals have a much longer wait in a temporary work visa before green cards are approved. But, something that I talk about all the time is this reality that individuals need solutions and stopgap solutions between OPT ending. And OPT is a blessing for this country that individuals are able to have 1 to 3 years of time after graduation to be able to work here and prove value to employers. And I want to talk, Varun, my next question to you is, what is the value of OPT and how to prove yourself during that time? But the reality is we need these stopgap measures in place. So Varun, my question to you is about OPT, and then I'm going to talk about the H-1B cap exempt solution as well. But if we could just hear a little bit for this group about how do you prove your value in OPT? What should you be thinking about during OPT so that you have the ability to stay after you finish that 1 to 3 years?
Oh, in many cases, being somebody who performs at meets expectations level is good enough. Like a lot of times we put a lot of pressure on our performance then playing a role in immigration. Yes, in many cases it does, but in most cases, the company, if you are performing at meets expectations level, if they see value in you, then they are going to continue the process. Most companies know by this time what the process is with the immigration because they've hired immigrants in the past. Now, to be one step ahead of that and to not be completely at the mercy of the company, you need to have some kind of a brand that you can market outside the four walls of that company. Now, that brand can be in form of you writing, but not necessarily. You can be somebody who's an active participant at events, somebody who understands how to build relationships and can network so that if there is a potential that your company doesn't not want to sponsor further, and nowadays you are getting layoffs even at big companies, so you always need to have a backup option. In that case, you can activate your network. You can use your brand, leverage your brand to find a better job position out there. Because I think what most international students wish is, I have spent the most amount of money I've ever spent in my life on education. How am I going to recoup that in the OPT period? Hopefully, you are able to complete that in the OPT period. So everybody is just focused on, I don't want to rock the boat. I just want to continue working so that my employment kind of stays on. But if you want one step further, if you do want to have a backup plan, then you need to build a brand that exists beyond the four walls of the company that you work at.
Do you mind if I add something to that, Danielle?
So, yes.
Okay, thanks. I actually realized I didn't even answer this question when you asked the previous time. So the 3 years that people get on OPT and STEM OPT is the perfect time to build a profile for an O1. Varun mentioned this himself before. O1 is probably the most underutilized visa of all that is in the system because there is no cap on it. It can be renewed forever, and there is no minimum salary that you have to make on an O1, which is great for founders. But for other people, the main thing is it's not a lottery system. It is uncapped, can be applied anytime in the year, and obviously it has a high bar. I know because I got it denied and then got it approved. But 3 years is sufficient time for most people who have a master's to build their profiles in that period if they start from day one. So I just want to make that clear for anyone who's a student right now listening.
I think it's a great point, and they're totally linked. By building yourself and your brand into something that is beyond your job itself, you are proving to be extraordinary. And Soundarya, you can talk about some specific examples. I know some are, maybe I'll just toss it to you. If you could talk about some specific examples of preparing yourself during that OPT period, what would you recommend individuals do as they're building their brand, like Varun is talking about, to build up that case for an O1?
Absolutely. And if you don't mind, I would quickly just like to show a diagram on the screen so that it's more concrete for people who are watching. So I'll just share it for like a minute. So these are, I call them the 8 pillars. These are the 8 criteria that the USCIS uses to measure if you're extraordinary. You have to satisfy 3 out of the 8 criteria to show that you're eligible for an O1. The ones that I recommend people go for generally are number 3 and number 5. It is completely within your control to go and judge competitions in your field, to go and volunteer for hackathons, startup pitch competitions, peer-reviewed journal articles if you're a researcher, or even just be on scholarship committee in any way, in some way show that you've judged the work of others in your specific field. And number 5 is authorship, where you show that you have published articles out there in trade publications, magazines, and journals in your field. So while some of the O1 criteria is not in your control, like number 6 is making a high salary, sometimes that's just, maybe you're in a field where you just cannot make that immediately. Or something like even awards, I would say, is not something in your control. But number 3 and 5 are very much in your control. So
Yep.
I just wanted to show this diagram so people can see these 8 criteria as well.
That's an awesome diagram and really helpful. And you definitely, hackathons, there are so many going around across this country, an awesome way to participate. And Varun and Soundarya, we can talk offline, but I'm really excited about potentially launching a series of hackathons out of the Build Fellowship with our university partners, and thinking through how we continue to build out those opportunities for folks. So as everybody here can tell, you're with solutions people that are constantly trying to figure out ways to support you and figure out solutions. And I want to share a little bit more on that note about the Build Fellowship. And I am trying to hide this as what am I doing? Here we go. Cool. So I want to just give a few moments to talk about the Build Fellowship, because as many of you know now, after OPT, you have a few years to prove yourself to an employer. And during that time, as Soundarya is saying, you can totally build yourself for an O1. You can be thinking of the H-1B lottery, but if you are not selected in the H-1B lottery, and some of you on this call might already be in this place where you've gone through years of your OPT, and you're now entering the H-1B lottery and you don't yet qualify for that O1, and you don't have the publications, or you haven't participated in a hackathon, or maybe you have one but not the other, and you certainly don't have 3, and your immigration attorney says, you know what, you have a 50% chance at an O1, then what do? You have to be your own risk assessment. You have to do your own risk assessment for yourself and think about what your options are. So I want to introduce to you the cap-exempt H-1B, because the cap-exempt H-1B is available at any time of year. It is uncapped and outside of the lottery system. And there are 4 types of organizations that you could work for full-time if you wanted. And you could get sponsored by any of those 4 types of organizations at any time. Those are universities, nonprofit research institutions, government research institutions, and nonprofits affiliated with a university. So after this call, if you want to go Google cap-exempt jobs, you can look for full-time positions, and there are lots of these entities around the country. But many of you on the call are also looking to work in the private sector. You want to stay at your tech company. You want to build your own tech company, and you want to, maybe work as a scientist. Whatever your path is, there's also a way to work 5 hours per week or part-time for a cap-exempt entity. And if you are sponsored in cap-exempt status by that cap-exempt entity, you can then have any U.S. employer file a full-time cap-exempt H-1B for you as well. So the Build Fellowship offers this 5-hour per week fellowship opportunity where our fellows actually are hired within their field to launch projects for students at our partner schools within your field of expertise. So I want to show you what this looks like. Our Build Fellows, you can see Vera, Gallery, Xavier. These are all individuals who have a technical background, who are working 5 hours per week as Build Fellows, launching these types of projects for students. And because they are doing this work, they are sponsored for part-time cap-exempt H-1Bs. And Xavier works full-time now at his biotech company that has sponsored a concurrent cap-exempt H-1B for him. So the idea here is that if you are open and willing and excited about spending part of your time also giving back to university students, you can be sponsored full-time also for a cap-exempt H-1B by your employer. To date, the Build Fellowship has 140 company partners that have nominated candidates for this. The key here is that we look for individuals who do have an employer, who want to do this with because the employer wants to keep you. So if you prove your value during OPT and this company says, you know what, you are someone that we know we want to invest in, we know you, we want you to stay here, the company can nominate you for this fellowship program and they will support you in the fellowship. We have a new way of doing the fellowship as well. If you are an individual whose company says, no, we don't want to pay for the fellowship, we have a new opportunity. If you have your own company or a company that is in your network that would be willing to support your fellowship, you can also set that up so that you have an entity that is supporting your fellowship. It could be your own company. So we'll talk, we can, talk offline if you're interested in that model as well. And Varun and Soundarya, we definitely can catch up on this too, because it's a way for individuals whose companies like these, companies like Deloitte and Amazon and BCG and Microsoft, they typically aren't willing to do unique pathways like this one. That's really what I find. However, if individuals can get into cap-exempt H-1B status themselves, then those companies might be more willing to file the concurrent H-1B on top of the one that they already have. And so that's what we're building out now. You can see that these are our university partners. All fellowships are remote, so you work with students from these schools remotely. And these are just a few of the types of companies we've worked with to retain talent. So if you're interested in learning about this, we require that you have at least a bachelor's degree in your field. 2 years of work experience is ideal. That can be your OPT time. And you're willing to mentor and work with students and lead these types of projects. The process is about 6 to 8 weeks after we do an evaluation. So it's pretty fast. We file premium processing. The whole idea is that this is something that will be feasible for you to do on top of a full-time job. So I wanted to talk about that because both Soundarya and Varun have posted many times about the cap-exempt H-1B. The Open Avenues Fellowship Program is in Soundarya's book as a solution for folks to be thinking about. So we're grateful that we're included as an example of one of these creative solutions. And I'm happy to answer any additional questions that would come up in our Q&A period. But it is something that, post H-1B lottery, if you have an employer or you have a company that could support this fellowship program, definitely get in touch with us and I will make sure to include the link, but you can come to the buildfellowship.com website and nominate yourself, get more information. We have an amazing resources page that we've launched. I want to turn to the questions in the Q&A because we have one that is about a different alternative. We have, we're talking about H-1B alternatives now. Soundarya, you talked about the day one CPT, that was something that came up many times in the questions from students. Someone asked, is day one CPT not advisable? Why or why not?
Okay, I will put it this way. There have been quite a few cases of USCIS hatching universities that were set up just as a shell university to give out day one CPT and collect money from these students. And when that happens, USCIS doesn't just go after the university, they also go after all the students who were given the day one CPT certificates or whatever they give through the university. There's even an instance of USCIS themselves setting up a university just to see who comes and takes admission there, just for the sake of staying in the country to work. So does it mean every single day one CPT is illegal? No. I think there are a few legitimate ones out there. And one thing that lawyers told on the tour was, number one, make sure you Google the day one CPT university extensively and try to see if there is any instance of a bad review or a scam being mentioned online. Number two, see how long the university has been set up. Because if it's a new one that came up in the last 3 years, probably stay away from that. Go for something that's been established for 10, 15 years, and or the oldest that you can find. And third is obviously talk to references of other students who've been through the process before you. Yeah, I don't know how to describe it. It's not that it's not possible, but it's the risk factor is quite high that I think you're much better off spending all that time to build an O1 profile, which is a legitimate pathway, than try to take this back door to staying in the country.
Yep. And Soundarya, just to build off of that O1 pathway that you're talking about, the other question that we got about O1s was, why would someone consider an O1 versus going to an EB1 green card, which is also extraordinary ability?
So key differences: O1 is a temporary work visa, EB1 is pathway to a green card. O1 is immediate. You can get it in as quick as less than 14 days. I got my O1 in like 4 days. I know people who got it in 2 days. So the moment you get the approval, you're immediately, if you apply through change of status, your status is changed to O1. EB1 is not like that. Even for non-Indian nationals, it still takes a couple years to get the green card or the EAD to let you do what you want. So it's not immediate. And the bar is much higher for an EB1. Even if the requirements are similar, as I said, I don't think I'm ready for the EB1, even though I have an O1 and I have an NIW right now. I'm still going to wait for another 6 months to file an EB1A. So you just have to show more of your accomplishments for the EB1A.
Yeah. Yeah. Awesome. There's an interesting question in here about a DOJ crackdown on big tech's approach to labor tests for visa sponsorship programs, and being discriminatory against American workers. The question, I can definitely answer the question about a crackdown on cap-exempt H-1Bs. There is a new rule that has been published about H-1Bs, and the final rule will hopefully be published in the next few months. The rule itself actually expands the definition and the use of cap-exempt H-1Bs. It is very much encouraging the use of cap-exempt H-1Bs as a tool to stay in the United States. And the concurrent H-1B model, I worked with a group of lawyers and State Department folks nationally to put together a Q&A for USCIS to answer questions about concurrent cap-exempt H-1B sponsorship so that we could have in writing that this was okay as a model. We built off of course, a framework that had been vetted by USCIS. My co-founder, Jeff Goldman, started the Global Entrepreneur in Residence program, which is the country's first cap-exempt H-1B model, and built that alongside USCIS and counsel for USCIS. So they were aware of this model. We now have in writing, pieces of clarification about concurrent sponsorship. And, I've personally talked to folks at USCIS year after year about this model. And this is something that we feel confident won't get cracked down on. Rather, everything shows that the pathway for cap-exempt H-1B sponsorship, which is very legitimate what we're doing. We've trained more than 1,000 students, American students, for careers via this pathway, is legitimate and adding value to the U.S. We have just a few minutes left, and I want to ask Varun and Soundarya, I want to ask a personal question because I know this myself, but building is really, it's a hard thing to do. Building a company is a hard thing to do. And you're also building in a space that is personal to you. What do you find, each of you, most rewarding about that work? And what do you find most challenging? Where are your personal barriers when it comes to building in this space? And Varun, I'd love to start with you.
What I find personally rewarding is the additional skill set that I've had to learn. I come from a community back in India that is entrepreneurial minded, but I felt like I was not a natural entrepreneur. I had to kind of learn everything. So that whole learning process in and doing that through the lens of just helping people who are fellow immigrants, that has been personally rewarding. What has been the most challenging is how do you monetize that? That has been, at least in my experience, the most challenging part of building a business.
Totally. It's the problem with, mission-oriented people will continue to do what is best for the mission and for the community. And it also, you don't want to burden the people that you're also trying to support the most. So I resonate with that. I feel that. Certainly why we charge companies, not people, not the foreign nationals for our fellowship program. But that is definitely a plight I resonate with. Soundarya, how about you? What is rewarding, and what are challenges you have faced as you've built this?
Uh, I think I'm in a uniquely privileged position because I'm very active on LinkedIn, as you both know, probably too much. So as a result of that, I also get a lot of messages from people, both on LinkedIn and other platforms. So there's always someone who reaches out and says something in some way in which either education or awareness or agency, something helped them in their immigration life. And that's always rewarding. And I actually have a Google Photos album where I save every single nice message that I get as a screenshot, so that on the really hard days, you can look back on that and be like, hey, like something good came out of this, at least. In terms of challenges, I'm a writer first. I'm not a founder. I mean, I'm now a founder, but I would still consider myself as a creative person and a writer, because that's how I started this whole project. I wanted to write a book, and it then became this online membership community, and then a newsletter, and this other stuff that's come out of it. So I think I'm constantly learning how to be a better founder and how to be better at scaling this company and reaching more people. So I don't want to bore people with the nuances of that, but that's definitely a big challenge.
Well, everyone here has two individuals who are wholly and wholeheartedly committed to good information and providing resources. So my last final question for each of you, in one sentence, what would you, if you could choose one wish from a magic genie, what would you change about the immigration system today? If you could, Varun, what would you choose?
I'll let Varun go first.
One wish is really, really bad. I think I wish I had three wishes. I think I can do very well with three wishes, but if I have to have one wish, it would be there be no country cap on green cards.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna say something similar actually. But now that Varun took that, I will say, honestly, everyone who walks into this country should, I know I'm not even saying should be given a copy of Unshackled, but some friendly and accessible guide that teaches them, here are all of your options and pathways. Here's a map of the territory. Here's what you can expect to happen in the next 3 to 5 years. So just be ready for it, like giving them that proactive information.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a really good one. And I definitely think that, we all here are going to stay committed to providing good information on LinkedIn, on websites. Varun and Soundarya, if you both want to put your LinkedIns in the chat here, or website, Varun for Beyond Grad, please do. I think everyone, if nothing else, would take away from, we hope that everyone takes away from this, that you have champions, you have sources of quality information at your fingertips. And we hope all here to continue to innovate and create so that your lives are improved and that you're able to figure out how you navigate this journey of yours. So Varun, Soundarya, thank you for being here and providing this support to everyone, and truly for your efforts, because it's admirable. And I love being alongside you both as builders.
Thank you for making this happen. You made this
Thank you
happen.
for hosting us. Happy to share what we know, and see you guys later.
Amazing. Thanks, everyone. Have a great night. Bye.